Daf Sadihe Amud Aleph. We are 12 lines from the top. ELIYAHU. We just brought a beraita that spoke about if someone stole an animal and he sheared it, or a cow, and then he gave birth, if it was pregnant. You pay the value, according to the Meir, you pay the value of the whatever it had, whether it was a baby or the shearings. Rabbi Dan says you pay it, you return as is, and Rabbi Shimon says you have to check the value of appraisal and pay with cash. So similarly, Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Dan say the same thing. We'll explain as we go. The question according to the Meir, what's the reason Meir holds that you have to return the animal and baby or the shearings? Mishum does he hold because you have to something that changes physically? Does that mean that the robber acquired it? And sorry, it does not change. It does not change ownership. Or maybe it does usually change, but over here we're imposing a penalty. The man of kamina, what's the difference whether or not it's a knas? The answer is if it changes physically for the negative, would be the difference. If it changes for the negative, then technically he has to return it, is according to the first opinion. But if it was a knas, then he would not. Tashma, stole an animal and it got older. If he stole slaves and it got older, you pay the value of what it was when you robbed it. Rabbi Meir tells the Chachamim, no. Regarding Davadim, you could say, here is your Ivid as is. But the animals, however, you pay at the time of the robbery. If you want to say that Rabbi Meir holds that even if a change happens, it returns, it stays with the owner. Nothing doesn't make a difference if changes happen. Then the animal also should be given as is. And if we say from here, rather we see that there is a acquisition by change. Regarding to the animal with the baby and the shearings is because of knas. The Gemara says, I'm not a proof. Rabbi Meir is arguing according to Chachamim. What does that mean? He says, according to me, I would say it doesn't make a difference. Even an animal should not be returned. But according to you, Hachamim, who hold that it does acquire, at least admit to me that throughout Shas we have a concept that the Ayved is considered karka, and therefore we know karka can't be stolen. In general, karka can't be stolen because it's not movable. So therefore, he says, admit that since Ayved is like a karka, land, and can't be stolen, therefore it should not be changing. Rabbanan say that Hachamim say that the slaves are like movable objects which can change, and the Ayved can acquire and has to reimburse in full. Tashma. If someone gave wool to a guy to dye, and he dyed to do red, and he did black. Shahor for Adam, or vice versa. He has to pay the value of the wool. The Met Samro, and he has to pay the value. The Met Samro v'shivcholo, but he doesn't have to pay the value and the improvement, which means if you will change it, doesn't make an acquisition. The Met Samro v'shivcholo by method, he has to pay the value of the wool and the dye that he used, the improvement. Other left from another, we can prove from here. So really holds usually it does change. Like we see over here, you have to pay the value. But over here, the difference is because it's a penalty by a robbery. Good proof. Ikadam, different version. Rather or not, Meir holds it was never a question. Because Rav switched off the opinions in the Mishnah that said regarding the animals and the slaves. Animal and aged, and they got older. You pay the value of the robbery. That's the opinion of Rabbi Meir. When say, regarding slaves, the robber can say, here it is in front of you. According to Meir, he obviously holds changes the ownership. It's considered an acquisition. Over here, in our Braita of the robber, it's a knas. What's the question about Meir? Here's the following question. Tika kanis, when he says it is a robbery that you have to do a knas, is it b'mezid? Is it only when he did something on purpose to steal? But maybe by accident there's no knas? Or rather, even if it was on purpose, by mistake, there would be a knas. Tashma, which I bring a proof. 5 people who are collecting money that they're owed, they only collect from unleaned properties. First one, perot v'sheva perot. Fruits and the improvement of fruits. We'll explain what that is soon. Someone took upon himself to support his wife's child from a previous marriage. They get this is number three, or a debt document that does not have a lien on it, or a ketubah that does not have a lien on it. Now, who said that if there's no lien written on the property, it must be a mistake, right? Who would write a loan document or any of these documents without a lien? He would hold a Meir. He holds that it's not considered a problem. He says, I don't care. Even if the guy didn't write it, we don't assume it's a mistake, and there's no lien. And yet we see in the case of fruits and improvement of fruits, you pay for an unliened property. So what does that mean? What's the case of improvement of fruits? Kegon. So what's the story must be? Kegon shegazam must be talking about a case where he stole a field from someone else and he sold it to someone else. Right? Stole a field and sold it. He improved it. That guy improved it. Now when it's leaving his possession to go back to the original owner, when the buyer is collecting his payment for the loss that he had by buying this property from someone else, the thief, collects the principal, the main value of the field from liened property. And the improvement that he did to the field, he pays from unsold, unliened properties. Now, if the buyer is collecting from the robber, we see that the original owner of the land comes and takes from the land and the improvements. Right? He's collecting both. My lab obviously we're talking about an amaretz. What? The karka nigzat in nigzat. He doesn't know that land can't be stolen. We see a guy, he can take the buyer from the land and the improvements. Therefore, so you see over here, even when someone did something by mistake, he accidentally did something, he still is able to collect the kanas of the improvements and anything that was done afterward. Question and even trying to prove a question in ear, he would hold there's a kanas even by mistake. When it says Amri, not a good proof. Referring to a guy who bought it, who was Tamid Hacham, and he knows land can't be stolen. Therefore, when he bought the stolen land and improved it for himself, he knew that he didn't really acquire it, and therefore he was just using someone else's property illegally, and therefore there is a kanas. Tashma doing different proof. Let's boil lo adom mitzvah shahor. Someone told someone else to dye it for him in red and he did it black instead. Shahor mitzvah adom. We had it a second ago. He told him to do it black and he did it red instead. Rabbi says, "No teno demei samro." He has to pay the value of the wool. Demei samro in only the value of the wool. Demei tamro v'shepro, but not the value of the improvement. If you think that you have to pay the penalty by mistake, even by mistake, he has to pay the value of the wool and the improvement because he did it by mistake. Therefore, we see you only have a kanas to pay the extra when it was on purpose and not by mistake. Good proof. Okay. Rabbi says, and a stolen animal returns as is. Rabbi Shimon says, you have to check if the appraiser didn't pay cash value. Well, I said earlier in the beginning, we're going to talk about what the difference is between Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Yehuda. My benai, what's the difference? Marazud said, whether or not the improvements were made to the actual stolen item that are still attached to the stolen item. So if we mentioned previously, if the animal was changed, if they gave birth. Now, what if it became pregnant and it stayed pregnant, right, afterward? Maybe that's about the Nigzal That said it belongs to the guy who got robbed, and therefore returns to him. Rabbi Shimon, it's about the Gazan Rabbi Shimon belongs to the robber. Rabbi says the Kula Amal Shevach Shagabek is like Gazlan. Everybody agrees that it belongs to the robber. Over here, whether or not the robber takes a portion of it, as if he's a partner, he takes a third, a half, or a quarter. Maybe that's what Rabbi says. Shevach Shagabek is the Kula Gazlan have. Rabbi says that all the improvements belong to the robber. Rabbi Shimon holds the robber only takes a portion. The Mishnah says, someone stole a cow and it became pregnant while he had it, and then it gave birth. If he had a sheep, he stole a sheep, and then it became full with wool, and then he sheared it while it was by him. Mishalim kishat gazal, you still pay the value of the animal at the time of robbery. Yada'in, only if he gave birth already. Then he keeps the baby. But if you do not give birth, then you have to give back to the owner. So, who says that the improvement that's still attached belongs to the guy who got robbed according to Rida? Hamani, who's this according to Rida? It makes sense perfectly according to Rida. That's why you have to return it. According to Damar Gazan, it belongs to the Gazan. Hamani, doesn't according to anybody. It's the good answer. Answer you who did not really the same would apply even if it did not give birth or was not the wool was not cut off. Here too, also the robber would pay the time of the robbery. And you don't pay all the extra stuff that came afterward, even if it's still attached. The fact that I mentioned only given birth, don't make a diuk from it. The reason why I mentioned the birth was to teach you I did a nasiv reshi since the first braita mentioned where it was already given birth. Nasiv sefer nami yada, it also mentioned in the second case that it gave birth. However, the halacha is different if it was pregnant from before or pregnant after the robbery. That's the difference in the first and second case. Tanaka we prove according to Rabbi Shimon says, we make an appraisal in cash to see whether or not how much percentage, whether it's 50, 30, or 25%. Marabashe. When you buy Rav, sorry, Rav Kahana, let me ask them a question. Rabbi Shimon takes a percentage. When we take away the improvements by giving him cash, do we give it with money, or do we have to actually take the percentage of the animal from the actual animal? Yeah, we have to slaughter it and split the meat. And he answered the question from what Rav Shmuel said. 3 people, we check the improvement that was made to the land. And we pay them in cash. A firstborn pays the ordinary son for the improvements, meaning if Mr. Papa Bear dies and he has 2 sons, a Bechor and a regular son. So the Bechor takes 66%, and the second son takes 33% because the older son gets double portion. Now, what if when the property they had was worth $100,000, they ended up after the father died, they kept the partnership in it, and then it ended up making another $200,000. So this opinion holds that extra $200,000 that was made after the father passed away does not get split 66-33, but rather it gets split 50-50. Because only the inheritance is split to 2/3 and a third. Also, a creditor can pay cash to the buyer of a property. Right? If let's say a guy bought a property, then realized it was stolen, and the guy who was stolen from, or whatever it was, or the lien was pulled, he has to pay it off. He has to pay the debt. He has to pay the buyer the improvements that was made to that property. And also a creditor that paid cash to the orphans as well. If someone bought something and the Yatamim pulled it out from their father's debts, they also can pay the Yatamim in cash. Did Shmuel really hold that a creditor can pay cash to the buyer? But we know that a Balachov, a creditor who collects the improvement, he collects the land without paying for the improvements. When do we say you pay for the improvements? Is when the improvements are ready. Meaning, it says the literal term is it reaches your shoulders. Meaning, if let's say it's fruits and the thing is growing, the grain, it grows to your shoulders, it's harvestable. That's considered an improvement. That's when you pay for it. But when it's not ripe, when it's only up to the knees and it's not ready to be harvested, that's not compensated. But we know there's many cases. He says that no, I've seen cases where the fruits and stuff were ready and harvestable, and he took it back and he didn't compensate the guy. Not a problem. When do we say that the guy collects the improvements without paying him? Is where he had the claim was for everything, including the improvements. So the $100,000 and the improvements was part of that value. But when the value of the property was $100,000 and then the extra improvement was $5,000, he has to pay the $5,000. That makes sense according to the opinion that holds that if the buyer of a liened property has money, he can't pay him off. Shapira, that makes sense. Meaning, if a guy has a lien property, the guy comes over to him and says, "Hey, sorry about the property you just bought. I had a lien on that from someone else's thing. I'm taking it." Can that guy who owns it now, who's trying to get ripped out, can he pay him cash and force him to pay cash and not let him take the property? Okay, so this makes sense according to the opinion that holds he cannot remove him. That makes sense because that's why Shmuel holds that if it equals to the value of the land without the improvements, you can still collect both the land and the improvements, and then pay Nadi for the improvements with cash. If the buyer, according to the opinion holds that you can buy him out, and then he can remove the creditor by paying him Nadi instead. Why does it take the land with the improvements? Maybe if I had money, I could pay you off with the whole land. Hashta, now that I don't have to pay you for now that I don't have enough money to pay for the whole land, give me land for my improvements. Meaning, if you want to take your land that's owed to you, fine. But that extra $5,000, I don't have to accept cash from you. You should also pay me land instead. The reason I'm here why the guy's able to pull it out, carte blanche, no question asked, is because not that it was just a lien, it was also an apotiki. Apotiki is an acronym for apot kai. When a guy made the land, it wasn't just a lien, it was a guarantee, this property. It was, here shall be your item, apot here shall be your item, here is standing your item, that'll be paid from here, and therefore that's why the guy's able to collect, because it wasn't just a lien, it was a guarantee that this land can be used as payment. Marava, the guy stole an item and improved it, and then he sold it. Or if he stole it, improved it, and he died, and it went to his heirs. Whatever he improved and sold, he sold. Whatever he improved and he gave to his children stays. What if he sold the stolen item and the buyer improved it? What's the halacha? Does the buyer get the cash? Or does the robber get the cash? All right, so Shimon sold from Reuven, sold it to Levi. Levi upgraded it. Now Reuven goes to Levi and is now going to collect it back. Now we know that there's a partnership. Whoever has the item gets the 30%, 25%, 50% of the improvements. Who gets that? Levi or Shimon? But once he asked the question, he answered it. When the robber sold it to Levi, he sold him everything. Anything that comes with it includes any improvements, and therefore, when he has to split it with the original owner, he splits that as well, and the robber will not be getting a part of it. Amen.